like to introduce Professor Sugata Mitra. Professor Mitra is renowned for the hole-in-the-wall experiment and the creation of Soul Schools and School in the Cloud initiative. He is a transformative figure in education, and his work, showcased in Slumdog Millionaire, has revolutionized educational paradigms worldwide. He is here to talk to us on the topic of what do children need to know in a world where they can learn what they need to learn whenever they need to learn it. Let us accord Professor Mitra a warm welcome.
You know, it's quite a rare way to start a lecture, I think, if you think about it. To start a lecture right after a song called Another One Bites the Dust. So, here we go. Now, you did some clapping exercises yesterday, one. And then today, you clapped for some really lovely performances. I love those, both the music and the dance. But I have one clapping exercise that you need to do, because this talk will eventually head into a rather strange area. At least I think you'll find it a bit strange. In order to prepare for that, you need to keep one idea in your mind, and probably the best way to get that idea across would be a very simple clapping exercise, which take a few seconds. What I would like you to do is to clap in unison, synchronously. And when I raise my hand, you stop, okay? So you have to clap synchronously. Can you start now? You got it? Now, if you were to record that and play it back, you'll notice there was the first about a second of chaos, random stuff. And then it all comes together, it collapses into this synchronous clapping. Now my question is, who brought the claps together? Was it any of you? Could any of you have done it? What do you think? No, obviously not. No individual. Then, who brought the claps together? It wasn't me. I wasn't doing like a PT teacher. I wasn't doing 1, 2, 1, 2. I was just standing here. So could it be that it was not who brought the claps together? It was what brought the claps together. Suddenly this auditorium becomes a little bit different. Is there something here that is not human? Well, think about it. What could it be? What brought the claps together? Was it just probability? Who decided? Who decided the frequency with which the claps will come together? Was it conscious choice? Or was it something else? Is there a collective consciousness here which you cannot sense, but which can, if it needs to, control you? And of course, if you really want to freak out, would it be the Good Shepherd? Think about that. Just keep that thought, hold that thought in your mind, okay? The collective consciousness. you know, you might think it's kind of an esoteric idea or whatever. But as I showed you, it's very simple. It's very tangible. You just saw it. Okay, so now I'm going to take a bit of a dive into history. As you can see, the name of the talk itself is Preparing Schools for a Different Future. Why should we do that? So I need to go a little bit into the past in order to explain that. Now, I must also tell you something else. Professors have a problem, almost all of them have a problem. They can't stop talking. So I would request Ravi, who is sitting over there, right? Ravi, let's work out a symbol. Okay, let's say you do this. Okay, put your hands right up and do this. If I see you do that, then I will stop within 2 minutes of that. Okay? All right, now let's go. Dive backwards. About 100 years ago, you would not have a talk like this. Because people would say, what do you mean prepare schools for a different future? What's different about the future? Well, maybe we'll have better classrooms or something like that. Maybe the syllabus will change. What else can be different? Well, quite accidentally, I saw the first signs of a difference quite some time ago. And at the bottom, for those of you who like poetry, you might remember that line. Out flew the web and floated wide. The mirror cracked from side to side. 25 years ago, many of you here were not even born then, I did an experiment which was very simple. 25 years ago, back in the late 1990s, the personal computer had just come into existence, and people, sort of looked at it as a very expensive, very complex piece of equipment that people had to learn how to use. And there was, no possibility at that. In those days, nobody ever thought that children could ever have anything to do with computers. It really was like that, For the few people here who remember the 1990s, a child with a personal computer would be considered similar to a child with a nuclear reactor. It just doesn't happen. So I decided to see what exactly would happen if I gave a child a computer, a child who had never seen a computer before, had never heard of the internet, and if I gave them an internet-connected computer. But how would I give them a computer in the first place? Well, I decided to put it in the street. How do you put a computer in the street? If I put a computer out here in Ooty on the road, it will just disappear in a few minutes. So I needed to put it somewhere. So I took a stretch of wall which separated my office from a slum in Delhi and made a little rectangular hole in it and poked the monitor through that and turned it on. It was 3 feet off the ground. And as you might imagine, immediately a throng of children came around it. There were no touch screens, but what I did put is I also embedded a touch pad into the wall. I just watched. I didn't do anything. And people said, well, what do you expect? They just stare at it. And they won't understand a thing. It's in English. They don't even know English. Well, in about a couple of hours, this is what happened. There's no audio here. The fellow on the right is 8 years old, was 8 years old. I guess now he's a lot older. To his left is a student. She is 6. And he was teaching her how to browse. This is in Rajasthan. Thiruvananthapuram. So everywhere, in a very short time, the children were browsing, were looking up stuff. In about a week, they had started downloading games from Disney.com, as it happens. And I just kind of asked them, what is this? Disney website had a game with Mickey Mouse in it. And they said, it's a game with a rat. I don't think Walt Disney would have liked Mickey Mouse being described as a rat, but anyway, they seem to do that. And nobody believed it. Everybody said, you obviously taught them, showed them how to do that. I said, no, I didn't. I didn't go anywhere near it. Nobody else did. The World Bank gave me a lot of money and said, if this is true, you've got to show that it works everywhere. And it took about 5 years and a long experiment, which is, sort of published and written about and everything. And we showed quite clearly that this would happen anywhere, everywhere, with children. Okay? So this is what we found. Given unsupervised access to the internet in safe and public spaces. Okay, very important. Remember the computer I put was inside a wall. Anybody passing by could see what was on it. It was a big screen. A safe and public space, groups of children can teach themselves to use computers and the internet by themselves. You know what? In the education system, they don't quite like those last 2 words, by themselves. We'll talk about it in a moment, but that's how it was, and quite possibly that's how it is. "16 years ago, I took the results from India and took them to northeastern England. Northeastern England, if you think of the map of England, there's London at the bottom, Scotland at the top, and somewhere about 2/3 of the way up is northeastern England. It's a poorer part of England. And I repeated the experiment there, except that you can't put it outdoors. The weather is too bad to do anything outdoors. So I put the hole in the wall inside the classroom. Very simple. Anybody can do this. Any of your teachers can do this. If you have, say, 20 children, take 5 computers, normal desktop PCs, and put it in a classroom so that the screens are clearly visible, and ask the children a question. That's all. It's as simple as that. So the English teachers would ask me, well, should we ask them to make groups? And I would say, if there are 5 computers and 20 children, what else can they do you think? They're not idiots, they'll form groups. So the groups formed by themselves. And guess what? The claps came together.
You can't catch me. You say it. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Well done. Very good. So again.
Power of the Supreme Being. The word Durga in Sanskrit means a thought or a place which is difficult to...
We went into Google and we typed in We went into Portal and we typed in Leonardo da Vinci.
Wonderful. Well, so, who was Durga in northeastern England with 9-year-olds? 20 minutes is all it took. So, we called it a self-organized learning environment. And it spread all through the schools in England because teachers said, well, this is too good to be true. I don't need to prepare for a lesson. I just convert the lesson into a question. We called it a big question. A few computers, the internet, one big question. And according to their estimates, about 60 to 70% of your work is done. The rest, you fill in. So I made another conclusion, also published. Somebody actually accepted this sentence. Given an engaging question, groups of children using the internet can learn anything by themselves. And people would say, anything? I haven't found anything that they didn't or couldn't learn. So I assume it's anything. I got a strange call in those days. For those of you who've heard or are interested in science fiction, you might have heard of the author Arthur C. Clarke. I got an email from Arthur C. Clarke, who was living in Colombo, saying, I'd like to meet you. I've been reading about your experiment. I went there and I showed him all the videos and everything. And he said something which is quite interesting, very simple, typical Arthur C. Clarke. When children have interest, education happens. Okay. He also said another thing which I haven't put on the screen there. I don't know how you will react to that. He said, a teacher that can be replaced by a machine should be. It's very, it's a strange sentence to think of it. A teacher that can be replaced by a machine should be. "14 years ago, I wrote an article in a newspaper in England called Guardian, saying that, here's what I've been watching and observing, and I find that children react very well to an elderly person on the screen, particularly if he or she is from, some other country, because it's esoteric for them. So if you're a retired teacher, if you're a grandmother who are interested in children, would you volunteer, would you give me 1 hour of your time per week for free? I got hundreds and hundreds of them. We called it the Granny Cloud. And the Granny Cloud, sit up there on the internet, I could beam them anywhere on the earth to children. And what would they do? They would not teach. It's bad enough to have a real life teacher teaching you. It's worse if you have a little thing on Skype. But what they would do is they would ask a question and said, if you like that question, I'll be back in a couple of days. You give me the answer. It's still in operation. I just saw today on Facebook a little school in Gurgaon called Diksha for underprivileged children who uses the Granny Cloud. Fabulous results. So basically, anyone can beam themselves anywhere. We all know this now. I mean, you know, because of Zoom and everything.
If you do it, then you lose. Okay, well, I'll explain. We'll do an example. We'll start now.
Okay, so you're a mixed
Big mouth. And he wants to get richer.
More richer.
And hope everyone will go involved.
Aboriginal art covers a wide medium, including painting on leaves, wood,
A bit of a challenge this afternoon. You know how you're all really, really good at answering hard questions, but you hand up if you think you're really good at it.
It handles physical motion when walking, talking, standing, and sitting. It lets you think, breathe.
Right part of the brain controls the left part. The left part of the brain controls the right.
So, to my surprise, this method spread out of England everywhere. I kept getting called to go and explain what it's all about, and from Australia to South America, finally into United States. Tens of thousands of teachers were experimenting with this because it was so simple. And in many countries, in many environments, they didn't even need anybody's permission to do this. Or maybe just a chat with the principal to say, do you mind if I try this for geography? Do you mind if I try this for history or whatever? Years ago, in 2013, I got a prize. It's called the TED Prize. It was a lot of money, $1 million. So I used that to construct 7 or 8, I think, facilities called the School in the Cloud. The idea was that what if schools and communities had a dedicated facility which could be booked and where teachers could organize a soul, a self-organized learning environment. So I created 3 of these in Bengal, 1 inside a school, 3 of these in a community in Bengal, 1 in a school in Delhi, 1 in a school in rural Maharashtra, in a small town called Fulton. And the teachers started to use it. Several years have passed since then, and the news is not all good. Not a single one of those survived. Not one. So I was amazed, And a Japanese foundation came and gave me some money and said, can you find out what's wrong? I said, the problem seems to be not of the method, but of sustainability. What does it take to sustain? In the schools, it closed for a very interesting reason. Whenever a principal changed and a new principal came in, the new principal would say, well, what is this? What's going on in here? Is it part of any curriculum? Is it part of any method? Whatever. I don't know. I think we have better use for this kind of space. And off it went. Inside the community, when the funding ran out, the parents said, why should I pay for this? I'd much rather pay for private tuition. What is this? They're on the internet playing games all the time. That's how they perceived it. So I realized that there was need for marketing and education, which I know nothing about. Anyway, that's what's happening currently. But what happens with the method? Well, first of all, you change the curriculum into a curriculum of questions. You know what a curriculum is? A curriculum is syllabus, okay? And what's a syllabus? Syllabus is everything that we know about a subject. So what's the geography syllabus? It's everything we know about geography, and we try to sort of pour that into your heads over a period of years. If you like it, you listen, and if you don't, you don't. I said, what if we were to look at the curriculum a little bit differently? What if we said the curriculum should be, for any subject, the big things about that subject that we don't know, that no one knows the answers to? What if we said, why can't we predict earthquakes? Leave them to it with the internet, with AI or whatever. Would that be a good way to teach, geophysics or history or whatever? That was the principle behind a curriculum of questions rather than facts. Because facts, well, you can get facts from anywhere, isn't it? Your facts are all in your pocket. It takes a second if they don't take the device out of your pocket and take it away. Instead of a curriculum of answers. And what's wrong with, if you're asked a question and you take out your phone and say, just a second, and give the answer? Now that apparently is not okay. For some reason. To me, it seems a bit like asking you, so what's the time? And as soon as you do this, you say, you can't use your watch. What would be the point? Five years ago, education came under attack, as you all know, from a virus. It destroyed the system very, very quickly. Everything closed. You know the story. Everybody went home. Teachers started to organize their lessons over the internet. The first thing they did was they tried to create the classroom over the internet. Okay. And said, this is terrible. The establishment reacted with horror. This just doesn't work. Good Lord, look at this. I was in Calcutta. I was locked down for those years. And I used to go out for walks and hear loud voices coming from every so often from houses. Saying, now, turn to page 34, turn to page 34, that kind of thing. And I also went on Zoom and discovered children, one of whom showed me a very neat trick. He had constructed a screen, dark screen, which said, reconnecting, ... which he would put up every now and then disappear and do his own thing. So all this was going on, and I realized that we're trying to make the internet into a classroom. It's not meant for that. It's like trying to take a motor car and make it behave like a horse and cart and say that it doesn't work. It's not going like this. It won't work. But by 2020, when the pandemic lifted, everybody had a smartphone. Practically everybody on the planet had a smartphone. And a friend of mine in America told me, he said, you happy? The hole in the wall is in every pocket. And I said, well, remember large screens, publicly visible, group access? there's something missing with this technology. This technology of isolation, of being exposed to a huge volume of information alone. It's like if I were to take one of you and say, come up here now, clap synchronously. And you would say, synchronously with whom? Okay? We need the collective. Two years ago, you all know this story, Gen AI came. Remember, ChatGPT, 30th of November, 2022. So ChatGPT came in, all hell broke loose. Why? Because ChatGPT clearly had passed what's called the Turing test. You know Turing, the famous Alan Turing, the guy who practically invented the digital computer back during the years of the World War II. People had said, when can you decide that a computer is as good or as intelligent as a human being? And Turing said, let's imagine a situation where you're in a room with two little slits on the wall through which a piece of paper can come out. You just ask a question to the wall, and two little pieces of paper come out with the answer. If by reading the answers, you cannot make out if they are written by a human or if they are written by a machine, then the machine is as good as the human. The idea was that behind the two slits, behind one there would be a computer, behind the other there would be a human being. If you can't tell the difference, then one is as good as the other, at least for that question. This is called the famous Turing test. And ChatGPT smashed it. There was no way to tell. How many people here have used ChatGPT? Okay, quite a few. So you know what I'm talking about. You can't tell that it wasn't written by a human being, or that it even speaks, of course. Have you noticed that, well, I've noticed that if you use it in India, it speaks with an Indian accent. If I use it in the UK, it speaks with a British accent. Okay, amazing stuff. So, generative AI, when it came in, I started getting an enormous number of requests saying, what will Gen AI do to education? What will Gen AI do to all of us? All jobs will go. These things are going to take over. The human race, is it over for us? Etc. And I thought, well, to be quite honest, what is it? So I started asking people all over the place. I asked them, well, what is generative AI? You know, the word AI has been around for a long time. AI, artificial intelligence, and that used to be that you write a nice, clever program, an if-then-else kind of program, and you look at its output and say, wow, how intelligent. That's the, what did somebody yesterday described it as? Deductive, was it? Or, when you break a problem down into its parts, yeah, that's right. So that's how AI used to be done. We thought that the brain was like clockwork. If we could understand how that clockwork works, then we can make a machine which will behave like that. It didn't work. For 50 years it didn't work. And people kind of lost interest in it until Gen AI. And Gen AI also wasn't working too well until one group of researchers at Google found a way. There's one paper there. I believe that one day that one paper is going to be compared with the seminal papers like those of, Marie Curie or Einstein. That paper is available, it's free download. It's called Attention is All You Need. And it's written by a group of authors, the first of whom is a person called Vaswani, quite possibly, almost certainly an Indian. So Vaswani et al., attention is all you need. Anyway, so I started asking people, so have you read Attention is All You Need? And they would say, well, what's that? I said, are you worried about Gen AI? Yeah, it's, it cannot be, it cannot be as good as human beings and this and that. I said, well, never mind, but the thing is, do you know how it works? And they said, well, it's software. I said, yeah, well, hopefully it's software, but do you know how it works? No answer. How about here? Do you know how it works? I don't blame you. But suppose I asked you another question. Do you know how a steam engine works? How many people here know how a steam engine works? Well, a few hands. How does an automobile engine work? How does an electric motor work? You know the insides, right? You know there are coils inside and magnets, and if you give this much voltage over here, the electromagnetic field will do the following, and it will turn this, and it will start whizzing around. Your physics teacher would have taught you that or whatever, or even if she didn't, you could just Google it and figure it out in a few minutes. So, we know all of that. So, but when it comes to Gen AI, I say, how does it work? We don't know. How can you be afraid of something without knowing how it works or what it is in the first place? It's a bit like looking at a motor car in the 1920s without knowing anything about what's under the hood and saying, there must be a horse hidden inside it. So people talk nonsense about Gen AI, similar nonsense. So I decided I would try to figure out what it is and how it works. Now I'm retired, so I don't have any organizational support. What I do have is a laptop. So I decided to make one on the laptop. So I opened my laptop, I read up some stuff, I started the programming, and very shortly realized that I need something about 1 billion times faster than my laptop for it to do anything sensible. But in the process, I did understand how it works. And I need to tell you that. Because otherwise, you'll go around saying that Gen AI has a little human being stuck inside it somewhere. It isn't like that. But it's much stranger than that. It's the story of how the claps come together. Oh, did something hear me? Okay. Well, first of all, no, by the way, I'm sorry, this is where the fun and games ends, okay? This is going to be a bit hard. You know, when things become complicated, it's when the teacher doesn't quite know what he's talking about. So we are entering that region now. Okay. Generative AI are neural networks. First of all, what's a neural network? Anybody heard of neural networks back there? Okay. come on, you must have heard of neural networks. Yeah, a few of you have. It's quite simple. It's actually a very simple idea. You take anything, any two things, and connect them. So if I tap this one, the other one moves because they're connected. Now I take a third thing, and I connect it to the other two. Tap one of them, the other two of them move. You know what? If it's just two of them, let's imagine there are two pendulums swinging, and I take a rubber band and I tie the two bobs together and swing, and I start doing a little dance. You know what? You can use physics to calculate exactly how they will move. Exactly. Now I take a third pendulum and I connect the three bobs together with rubber bands. And I set one of them swinging, starts moving in a little intricate dance. Now, all of 2000 years of physics cannot calculate where the bobs will go. It's called the three-body problem. It hasn't ever been solved. Just three. Inside our brains, there are things called neurons which are connected to each other, like the bobs of those pendulums. They're not just three, they're about a trillion connections. When you nudge one, the whole thing fires up. Thoughts appear. That's called a neural network. Very easy to simulate. Very easy to simulate. Except that you need a lot of power to keep it running. So you see that diagram over there? That shows you what it looks like. Just little nodes connected to each other. The first bit. Okay. Don't worry, don't get scared. Right. On the left, there are three artificial neurons. You can put in some inputs, put in some numbers into them. In the middle are a layer of neurons. Every one of those is connected to those three. And then that layer in the middle are all connected to one single neuron, which is from where the output comes out. Got it? You okay? Yeah? Nod. All right. Now, the only thing that happens is that suppose I throw a number 5 at one of the input neurons. So it obviously goes to all the neurons in that middle layer. All the neurons in the middle layer accept that 5 and throw it out to the output. Except that every neuron changes that 5 just a little bit. Some increase it a bit, some decrease it a bit, some add things to it. That's what all those middle numbers are. They're called weights. They just show what that node will do to a number that's thrown at it. And out comes the output. So I made a problem. Okay, I made a problem for myself. I said, okay, suppose this is the origin, and here is a point, x, y, z, and I want to find out how far away is x, y, z from my finger. I think most of you here know the answer, isn't it? Pythagoras found it out thousands of years ago. Very simple answer. So I made a whole lot of points, and how far away they all were, and fed it into my neural network. When you feed in the first set of coordinates, it produces a wrong answer. When it produces a wrong answer, you say, go back and correct the weights until you get the right answer. Then I put in the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and 1,000,000 times. Over 1,000,000 iterations, the neural network starts to produce all the right answers. Every time you put in 3 numbers, it tells you how far away the point was, quite correctly. In other words, it's solving Pythagoras' equation. But how? We don't know. It's just multiplying and throwing out, multiplying and throwing out, multiplying and throwing out. It's nothing like what engineering has ever seen before. A machine that works, but we don't know how it works. And we can't know how it works. Does it know Pythagoras' theorem? These numbers are real, by the way. If you construct one, it will solve that equation at the bottom. Does it know what that equation is? We don't know, we can't know. But how can it know anything? It's just a bunch of numbers. We don't know. So what do we do? We have a problem with a single word. A word which is very central to all of education. Knowing. What does knowing mean? We don't know how they work. Just as, you can look at somebody and recognize their face, but if I ask you, how did you recognize that face? You don't know how you do it, but everybody does it. So now, depending on what inputs and outputs you construct, and how much training you give, a neural network can do anything. Get the hang of this, okay? This is the strange part. It's not the central engineering. That's really, really, really simple. Just a few thousand lines of code. That's all it is. I've written one, so I know it's very simple. One afternoon you can write it. The central neural network. What is difficult is to create the training data. What data will you train it on? What inputs, what output? What inputs, what output? Suppose the inputs were music, and the output will be music. Or it could be text. It could be anything. You decide. But you need the test data. How do you make the test data? You know how they do it with ChatGPT? They just give it fill in the blanks. The cat dash the mat. What's the missing word? Anybody? The cat dash the mat. Come on, somebody give me a word or words. Sat on, okay. The cat sat on the mat. Okay. The cat slept on the mat. Correct. The neural network adjusts its weights. Okay, sat on the mat, slept on the mat. And then he said, the cat dashed the mat. And the neural network said, ate. The cat ate the mat. No, that's wrong. Adjust the weights. The cat stood on the mat. Right. Adjust the weights. On and on and on until it gets the hang of the whole thing. Except that Vaswani et al. Said, there is one problem. What came before that sentence? What if the sentence before that was, there was nothing to eat in the house. Some tasty soup had spilt on the mat. The cat dashed the mat. The cat ate the mat. Attention is all you need. Attention to the context. But now we are in a different domain altogether. We are in the domain of the language teacher. computer scientists scrambling around. And so, oh, what do those guys do, those language teachers? Oh yeah, they make tests and they give examples and they give, they make training and they make you read stuff and they ask you questions about it. And oh my God, but that's exactly what we do when we're training ChatGPT. Should we talk to the teachers? It's 2024. That dialogue is just beginning. So, as I promised you, it gets worse and worse. There are 4 things that are inside ChatGPT, okay, or generative AI in general. You have to know this. I mean, if you know that inside a steam engine there are pistons and cylinders and boilers and steam and pressure, then how can you not know what's inside ChatGPT? Inside ChatGPT there are these 4 things. Tokenization, you take whatever it is you want that thing to know and you break it down into its smallest components. Text is the easiest. In text, what's the token? A word. Because text is made up of words. What if I took music? Would it be notes? They say, no, that's too simplistic. It's actually a sequence of notes and also what notes came before. They're still working on it. Which is why you don't have a generative AI that produces music too well. Art, they've almost done it. The tokens are little patches. They're called patches. A tree is close to a patch called green. So trees are green, that's okay. Trees have brown branches, that's okay, etc. That's called tokenization. So you first tokenize. Having tokenized, then you embed the tokens. Where do you put them? Okay? So the cat and the mat, if you had, imagine a space. There's this cat, there's the word mat, and there's the word slept, stood, etc. All of them are close to mat. The word ate is far away. Got it? That process of putting the different words in different places like that in that space, that's called embedding. The English teacher does that all the time. You embed words into your mind. You know certain combinations are absurd, certain combinations are not. It's just that she doesn't call it embedding. In her vocabulary, it's something else. We don't have a common language yet. Tokenization, then embedding, then of course attention. What came before? What was the context? And finally, token prediction. The cat dash the mat, predict what will come over there. That's all there is to generative AI. It predicts the tokens as it goes along. It does it so quickly that it looks as though it's just typing. But it needs to be trained endlessly for the embeddings to happen properly. So imagine this space, a multi-dimensional space. You can't even imagine it, where all these words are floating around. In the case of ChatGPT, it's just about 1 trillion tokens floating around in this kind of space. When you fire a question at it, it uses attention to pick out the answer, construct it. It will never make a grammatical mistake. It will never make a spelling mistake. I hate to say it, it makes linguistics obsolete. So, a couple of years back, I wrote this article, which was very badly taken by the readers. It was called The End of Knowing. What do you need to know for? Well, let's see what we consider as a wonderful piece of knowledge. What's a wonderful piece of knowledge? Is it going to rain tomorrow? A boring question. Anyway, your phone will answer it in 2 seconds. Will ooty disappear into the earth. But try that with ChatGPT, it will give you a pretty weird answer to that. Okay, but not incorrect. What do we do? What do you do in that world? What should we know? Why should we know all this stuff? Why should we know it ahead of time? You know, if you look at the system you're in, which is essentially the British system of education, or maybe a combination of the British and the Prussian system of education, the idea was that you should know a whole lot of things just in case you ever need it. The key words are just in case. Why? Because it was created in an age where you might be lost at sea on a sailing ship with nothing except for a theodolite, and somebody asks you, "Where are you?" And you say, "Yea, cosine of angles." Okay? Logarithm, where's my logarithm table? Okay. You're not going to be lost on any ship, let me tell you, anywhere. And even if you were, you're going to say, you're not going to say, "Where are my logarithm tables?" You're going to say, "Where's my phone? Does it have enough charge in it?" That's about it. Why should you know? And when you do need to know, you can know in seconds. So is it possible, is it at all possible to have a generation that grows up with just a phone? Think about it. There are a couple of things that AI does. Kind of funny stuff, you know. They hallucinate. They make up things. They have doctrine. They say all sorts of things. They have verbose mediocrity. They'll go on saying a huge paragraph saying nothing at all. Sounds very human, doesn't it? And they show signs of madness. Okay? So this time it doesn't remind you of Turing, and it doesn't remind you of your English teacher. It reminds you of this gentleman on the right. Do you recognize him? Sigmund Freud. He knew how those things work. So what's going to happen next? For all of you here, students and teachers, the next few years, very interesting years, you'll look back on them with, fondly. A symbiotic relationship between education and generative AI. It's not a question of generative AI destroying education. It's a question of what education will do to generative AI. Look at what's needed. Data sets. What data does it learn from? That's a skill that you guys will need. You'll get jobs for that. Assessments. How do you check if a network has learned? Recursion. What do you do when the answer is wrong? What do you feed back? In other words, look at the bottom. And now the teachers can sit up. Curriculum, pedagogy, and examinations. That's what's needed for AI. But those are the building blocks of education. We know that stuff. They don't. The comm science guys. So Gen AI and education will disrupt each other continuously for the next few years. You're going to live through that. And then we'll have to figure out where it all ends. It's quite clear that in 10 years, given the right data sets and the right kind of training, Gen AI will do anything better than humans, anything at all. Are you worried about it? Elephants can lift things better than human beings can. Horses can run better than human beings can. So what? So what will human beings do? We will do one thing that nothing else on the planet does. We will ask the questions to which no one knows the answer. And this we have done since the beginning of time. Okay, so here are some preparations. I'm totally out of time, but maybe Ravi will share that slide with you at some stage. Focus on comprehension and communication. Computing you already do. Comprehension and communication. You have a big problem with that in India. You know, on the telephone, have you heard people saying, "Kal subah 9 baje aa jana." Kitne baje aana hai? You know, fill in the blank. Kitne baje aana hai? 9 baje. समझ गए ना? हाँ जी. अच्छा ठीक है. कल फिर 9 baje. Okay. Are we all neural networks in the process of training then? When will we ever get trained? That's what you should come out of school with. Okay? Teachers must understand the nature of... I don't know if this last 20 minutes has put anything in your head about how Gen AI works. I don't know if I was able to do that job properly, but if I have, let me tell you one thing. You are a step ahead of teachers, hold on, anywhere in the world right now. You know what I did? I asked Gen AI, there's a program called DAL-E. I said, if this was my lecture, what should the last slide be? Thank you.